The evening mist descended slowly over the towering pines of Juneau, Alaska, thick with the scent of resin and melting frost. The forest was quiet, save for the distant call of a raven and the crunch of tires on frozen earth. Michael Reed, a wildlife photographer in his late 30s, steered his old Jeep along the familiar dirt trail that led deep into the wilderness. His face, angular and weathered from years spent chasing storms and stories, was marked by faint scars, reminders of his past life as a war correspondent. Once he had photographed the chaos of men. Now, he sought peace in the quiet pulse of nature. Michael's dark hair was flecked with silver at the temples, and his beard carried the same tired salt. His eyes, grey like an overcast sky, had seen too much suffering to easily trust silence. Yet here, in the lonely woods, he felt closer to redemption. Every time he pressed the shutter, he believed he was capturing something purer than human cruelty. Survival without vanity, struggle without hatred. But that evening the silence felt wrong, too heavy. The forest didn't hum with life as it usually did. It waited. Michael rolled down his window. The air was sharp and metallic, carrying a strange tang, the kind that precedes either a storm or a revelation. Then came the sound. It started faint, like the groan of an old tree bending in the wind, then deeper, rougher, a roar, low and broken, trembling as if torn between rage and agony. Michael froze, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. That wasn't a bear's dominance call, nor the echo of a wolf. It was something else, something pleading. He pulled over, the Jeep's headlights cutting through the fog in two narrow beams. The sound came again, closer this time, from beyond a tangle of spruce and alder. He grabbed his flashlight, his camera slung over one shoulder out of habit, and stepped into the cold. Every instinct screamed to stay inside the vehicle, but his curiosity, or perhaps his guilt, was stronger. Michael had spent too long photographing pain without ever stopping it. That old shame still followed him, from the desert wars, from the refugee camps where he'd stood behind a lens while people starved. Tonight, he would not be a witness. He would be a man who acted. The forest swallowed him quickly. The beam of light sliced through the fog, revealing only breath and shadow. Then he saw it, a dark shape, larger than any man, staggering between the trees. His heart slammed against his ribs. A brown bear emerged from the mist. Its fur was matted with mud and streaked dark with blood. The creature's size was immense, nearly 7 feet at the shoulder, but it swayed as if the earth beneath it shifted. Michael instinctively took 2 steps back. His light trembled across the animal's face. What he saw froze him. The bear's eyes were not wild, they were haunted, dull amber flecked with milky grey, ringed by exhaustion. Not the eyes of a predator hunting, but of a soul begging. On its neck hung a metal collar, dull and rusted, the engraved letters barely visible. Northern Star Circus. Michael's breath caught. He remembered the news, a travelling circus that vanished months ago after a string of animal cruelty reports. Most thought the owners had fled south. The authorities never found their animals. Until now. The bear stumbled forward and fell to its knees in the snow, letting out a groan that made the trees shiver. For a moment, Michael saw not a beast, but a prisoner that had escaped too late. His fear turned into something deeper, pity. He crouched slowly, lowering his flashlight so as not to startle it. "Hey there, buddy," he murmured, his voice raw with uncertainty. "Easy now," his mind raced. Every survival instinct told him to leave, yet his hands moved on their own. He reached for his backpack and pulled out a strip of dried venison jerky and a half-full water bottle. He placed them on the ground, then backed away several paces. The bear sniffed the air. For a long, breathless moment, it didn't move. Then, inch by inch, it approached the food. Its movements were heavy, deliberate, the movements of a creature learning to trust again. It devoured the jerky in small bites, then licked the snow where the water had spilled. Michael stood motionless, flashlight shaking slightly. Beneath the fear, he felt something awaken. A fragile connection, wordless but undeniable. When the bear finally lifted its head, its gaze met his. There was intelligence there, and pain, and something that felt like plea. He whispered, almost to himself, "What happened to you?" The bear didn't answer, of course, but it turned, glancing toward the west, toward the darker part of the forest. Then it looked back at him, as if asking him to follow. Michael's pulse pounded. His camera hung heavy at his side, useless for once. He knew he was standing at a crossroad, between fear and compassion, safety and purpose. The old journalist inside him urged retreat. The man he was becoming took a cautious step forward. The bear grunted softly and began to move, slow but determined, deeper into the mist. Michael hesitated for only a moment before following, drawn by something larger than reason. A whisper inside that said this meeting wasn't chance. And as the fog thickened around them, man and beast disappeared into the forest. Two wounded souls walking toward a truth neither yet understood. The bear's eyes were not wild, but pleading, and for the first time in years, Michael felt he was meant to listen. The morning light broke reluctantly over the frozen valley, thin and pale like breath against glass. The air in Juneau's northern woods was brittle and sharp, and the world seemed washed clean by frost. Michael Reed parked his jeep near the same clearing where he had met the bear the night before. His hands trembled slightly, not from cold, but from something he couldn't name. Fear mixed with purpose. Beside him walked Dr. Emily Carter, a woman in her mid-30s whose presence seemed to bring calm even to chaos. Emily was tall and slender, her posture confident yet gentle. Wisps of blonde hair escaped the braid at her neck, framing a face both delicate and resolute. Her eyes were a clear, steady blue, the eyes of someone who had seen suffering and refused to look away. She had once worked for the Anchorage Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, treating creatures caught in poachers' traps. A mountain lion she had failed to save years ago had left an invisible scar in her heart, and since then she had vowed never to let fear or bureaucracy stand between her and a life that could still be saved. Michael had called her just after dawn, his voice rough and urgent. He had told her about the wounded bear, about the collar marked Northern Star Circus. She had driven 2 hours without hesitation. Now, kneeling beside the creature, Emily's hands moved with careful precision, her leather gloves stained dark from antiseptic and old blood. Boris, the name she gave the bear, lay quietly, his sides heaving with slow, labored breaths. His fur, a deep russet brown beneath the dirt, was tangled and thin. Around his neck, the metal collar had cut deep into the flesh, leaving grooves of scar tissue and fresh sores. Emily cleaned the wound in silence, the sound of cloth against fur soft but deliberate. "It's been chained for months," she murmured, "and these marks—" Her finger brushed the small punctures along the shoulder. "Tranquilizer darts, multiple injections over time." Michael crouched nearby, taking photographs, not for publication, but as proof. "They must have kept him sedated," he said. His voice was low, tinged with anger. "Drugged him to perform, then left him when the money ran out." Emily nodded. He's lucky you found him before the cold finished the job. But Boris wasn't still for long. The moment Emily wrapped a temporary bandage around his neck, the bear stirred. His head lifted, breath fogging in the chill air. His eyes, now clearer than the night before, fixed on the forest beyond. Then, without warning, he rose, slow, unsteady, but determined. "Hey, whoa, easy," Michael said, stepping back. Boris ignored them, turning west, the heavy crunch of his paws pressing deep prints into the snow. He paused only to look back at the two humans, a low rumble vibrating in his chest, not threatening, but insistent. Emily looked at Michael, confusion mixed with awe. "He wants us to follow." Michael hesitated. "Or he's leading us to our deaths." Emily gave a faint half smile. "I've followed worse guides." They gathered their gear, first aid kit, camera, and a tranquilizer rifle Emily brought, just in case, and followed the bear into the woods. Snow fell lightly, muting every sound. Boris moved slower than before, his injuries forcing him into a careful rhythm. Yet there was purpose in his stride, a strange awareness, as if he knew every tree and ridge by heart. For an hour they trudged through thick forest, the smell of rust and hay slowly replacing the crisp scent of pine. Emily's boots crunched on something metallic, an old chain half buried in the snow. Nearby lay a torn scrap of red fabric, faded but still readable. "Northern Star Circus. The wonder of the wild." Michael bent to pick it up. The fabric crumbled slightly in his hands, frozen stiff. His throat tightened. "They were here," he said. Emily glanced around. The trees opened to reveal a clearing, wide and unnatural, too flat, too bare. Old tire tracks had frozen into the earth. In the middle of the field stood the skeletal remains of a metal frame, bent and rusted like the ribs of a fallen beast. "The circus," she whispered. "They set up camp here." Boris stopped at the edge of the clearing. He let out a sound halfway between a growl and a moan. It wasn't anger, it was mourning. Michael raised his camera, but didn't take the shot. He couldn't. The bear's grief felt too human. Emily walked forward, inspecting the remnants, broken crates, splintered poles, and scattered straw now frozen in the ground. "They didn't just leave," she said. "They ran." Michael's gaze swept the horizon. "And they left him chained to die." Snow began to fall heavier, coating the ruins in white silence. Boris lumbered toward one of the half-collapsed tents and sniffed the air. Then he did something that made both humans pause. He looked back at them, then lowered himself onto the ground, pawing at the snow near the tent's entrance. Emily knelt beside him, brushing away the ice. Beneath lay a broken lock and a small metal tag, engraved with a number, not a name. No, 7. Her hands trembled. "They numbered them," she said softly. "Like cargo." Michael's jaw tightened. The weight of it all settled over him. This wasn't just about one animal. This was about a story buried in snow, one that needed to be told. As Boris lifted his head again, the wind carried a faint sound from deeper in the woods, a creak, a metallic groan, almost like cages shifting in the cold. Emily's eyes met Michael's. "Did you hear that?" He nodded, already checking the camera battery. "Looks like our story isn't over yet." They turned toward the sound, snow swirling around them, while the bear followed close behind, a silent sentinel leading them deeper into the heart of the forgotten circus. In the clearing where laughter once echoed, only sorrow and footprints remained, guiding them toward the truth. Night fell over the clearing like a heavy curtain, muffling the world in silver and silence. The moon hung low, pale and swollen, its light bleeding through the torn fabric of the circus tents. Michael Reed and Dr. Emily Carter stood side by side, their breath rising in misty clouds as the cold deepened. The air inside the ruins was thick with decay, the mingled scents of rust, mold, and something far worse, neglect. At their feet, Boris, the brown bear, moved with a strange, deliberate purpose. His massive form cast a trembling shadow across the broken cages that lined the field. Michael lifted his flashlight. The beam slid across the steel bars of an enormous cage where a motionless shape lay huddled in the corner. When he stepped closer, his heart lurched. A Siberian tiger, its once glorious coat now dulled by grime, lifted its head weakly. Its ribs were sharp beneath the skin. Its eyes, two pale blue moons, blinked slowly in the beam of light. Nearby, another cage held a baboon, its fur patchy and matted, clutching at the bars as if praying to escape. Farther still, a snow leopard curled upon itself, chest barely rising, its breath shallow and slow. Emily's gloved hands shook as she approached the first cage. "Dear God," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They've been left here for weeks, maybe months." Her training took over. She knelt, cutting through the lock with a multi-tool from her belt. Michael steadied the flashlight for her, though his jaw clenched with barely contained rage. "They left them to die," he said. His tone was low, controlled, but the tremor in his voice betrayed the storm underneath. Years of witnessing human cruelty, first in war, now in peace, had hardened him, but this felt different. These weren't soldiers or victims of conflict. They were innocents, abandoned because someone decided they weren't profitable anymore. Emily freed the tiger first. It staggered to its feet, bones cracking like dried twigs. She tossed a handful of jerky from her pack, and the animal sniffed it before swallowing the pieces whole. Tears burned her eyes, but she kept her focus. "If we move fast, we can still save some of them," she murmured. Boris gave a low growl, padding along the row of cages. He sniffed each one, letting out a deep rumble of recognition. He lingered longest beside the snow leopard's cage, his heavy paw resting against the bars. Emily noticed the gesture and paused. "He knows them," she said softly. He was one of them. Michael followed Boris as the bear led him toward a smaller, makeshift structure near the main tent, a wooden shack half buried in snow. Inside, the smell intensified. Broken crates and old feed bags littered the floor, and on a crooked table lay a weather-stained ledger book. Michael brushed the dust away and flipped it open. Pages filled with sloppy handwriting, faded ink, and numbers told a story more horrifying than he expected. Animal counts, feeding, schedules, medical supplies crossed out in red, and at the very end one sentence scrawled hastily across the page. "No funds left. Leaving tonight. Let them go to sleep." Michael's stomach turned. They meant to let them starve. Emily stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by moonlight. "We have to contact animal control now, and police. This is a crime scene." He pulled out his phone, but the screen showed no signal. The storm clouds gathering overhead had swallowed any chance of connection. He cursed softly. "No reception. I'll try sending coordinates. Maybe a short message will get through." His fingers moved fast, typing in the GPS data before the battery icon blinked red. The message sent barely, and the phone died. Emily sighed, pulling her parka tighter. "Then we wait till morning." They returned to the clearing. Emily built a small fire from what dry wood she could find. The flames crackled weakly, sending sparks into the frozen night. Around them, the rescued animals lay still in their cages, the firelight reflecting in their weary eyes like fading stars. Boris settled near the edge of the fire, his massive body curled protectively between the humans and the caged animals. His breathing was slow, rasping but steady. Michael watched him quietly. "You think he brought us here on purpose?" Emily nodded without hesitation. "He's not just surviving, he's remembering. Maybe he couldn't save them before, but he came back for them now." Michael stared into the fire, the reflection dancing in his grey eyes. He thought of the photographs he had taken in war zones, of children who had no one left to speak for them, of faces blurred by tragedy. "Maybe that's what we're all trying to do," he murmured, "go back and fix what we couldn't before." For a while, silence returned, gentle, almost sacred. Snow began to fall again, thin flakes landing on Emily's hair and melting against the heat of her skin. She looked at the bear, whose eyes were now half closed, a faint rumble in his chest like the hum of a prayer. "He's tired," she said softly. "But I think he finally feels safe." The wind howled once more, carrying faint metallic echoes from deeper within the circus grounds. Cages groaned, something shifted in the dark, and for a moment it felt as though the ruins themselves were breathing. Michael reached for his flashlight, his instincts flaring. "Did you hear that?" he asked. Emily nodded, rising slowly to her feet. "There's more here than we've seen." And somewhere beyond the flickering firelight, a new shadow moved. The night in the ruined circus became a vigil of sorrow and awakening, where a wounded bear led two souls closer to the truth, buried beneath chains and silence. The first light of dawn crept through the trees, fragile and gold against the snow. The air was alive with motion, engines rumbling, radios crackling, and boots crunching on frozen ground. The once desolate clearing of the Northern Star Circus now teemed with people and purpose. Michael Reed stood near the remnants of the main tent, his face pale beneath the chill, exhaustion visible in the lines around his eyes. After a night without sleep, his mind hovered between disbelief and relief. Around him, flashing lights from emergency vehicles bathed the ruins in hues of red and blue, like strange flowers blooming in the cold. The first to step out of the rescue truck was Officer Daniel Hayes, a broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s with a trimmed beard, peppered grey, and a posture carved from discipline. His blue uniform bore the insignia of the Alaska State Wildlife Unit. Daniel's sharp hazel eyes swept across the scene, methodical, controlled, but when they fell upon the cages, a flicker of pain crossed his face. "Christ," he muttered, "how long have they been here?" Michael extended a trembling hand. "Long enough to lose everything but hope." Beside Daniel emerged Dr. Marissa Lee, a veterinarian from the Anchorage Wildlife Response Team. She was petite, with dark brown hair pulled into a tight bun, her almond eyes focused with quiet intensity. Despite her calm exterior, her movements betrayed urgency. She carried compassion like a weapon. "Let's start triage," she said firmly, signaling her team. "We move fast, or we lose them." Emily Carter, pale but resolute, immediately joined her. The two women exchanged brief nods, professionals united by unspoken understanding. Together they moved from cage to cage, examining the animals with swift, efficient grace. The hiss of tranquilizer darts, the soft clatter of metal cutters, the hum of stretchers, it became a symphony of rescue. Boris, the brown bear who had led them here, watched it all in silence. His head rested on the snow, eyes half closed, as if measuring the world he had saved. His breathing was shallow, but calm. When Dr. Lee approached to inspect his wounds, she paused, astonished by his stillness. "He's not resisting," she said. "He knows we're helping." Emily knelt beside the bear, her gloved hand brushing through his coarse fur. "He's smarter than most people I've met," she whispered. Boris's ear twitched in response, and for a fleeting second it felt as though he understood. Daniel radioed back to headquarters, his voice steady. "We've confirmed multiple species alive. Evidence of neglect and abandonment. We'll need law enforcement backup for containment and transport." As the rescue expanded, journalists began to arrive. Among them was Sophie Alvarez, a young field reporter from the Anchorage Daily Times. She was in her late 20s, tall and slender, wrapped in a thick brown cam-brown parka with a wool hat pulled over her dark curls. Her sharp green eyes darted between the rescuers and her notepad, capturing details with instinctive precision. Sophie had made her name covering environmental scandals, her sense of justice born from her own childhood near polluted oil fields. "Mr. Reed," she called out as Michael secured a camera tripod. "Is it true the bear led you here?" Michael hesitated, glancing toward Boris. "Yes," he said finally. He remembered where he came from, and he wanted us to seize Saetsi. By mid-morning, the operation was in full motion. Cranes lifted cages, medics wrapped bandages, and the once silent beasts began to stir. A Siberian tiger roared weakly, the sound echoing through the forest, a cry that was no longer despair, but survival. The baboon clung to a medic's jacket as it was carried to the transport truck. The snow leopard blinked in the sunlight, its eyes reflecting the sky. When the final truck door shut, a hush fell over the clearing. The circus lay stripped of life, its empty tents trembling in the wind. Only Boris remained, surrounded by the scent of disinfectant and diesel. Emily crouched beside him once more. "You'll be going too," she said softly. "A sanctuary in Denali. They'll take care of you." Boris lifted his head, eyes heavy but warm. Michael raised his camera one last time. The shutter clicked, a single frame capturing a creature not defeated but redeemed. Days later, the news spread across America. The ringleaders of the Northern Star Circus were arrested in British Columbia, charged with animal cruelty and fraud. The images Michael captured appeared on every major network, stirring public outrage and empathy in equal measure. The government announced stricter laws regulating animal entertainment, and funds poured into wildlife sanctuaries across the country. Months passed. Snow melted into rivers, and the forest bloomed green again. One morning, Michael drove to the Glacier Ridge Sanctuary, where Boris now lived. He found the bear standing near a pond, fur thick and shining under the spring sun. Boris looked at him from behind the safety fence, calm and majestic, as if time had never broken him. Michael lifted his camera once more, and this time, when the shutter fell, he smiled. "You didn't just survive," he whispered. "You forgave us." That photograph would grace the cover of National Wildlife magazine under the caption, "A bear not only saved, but saving us still." The morning light over Alaska revealed not just rescued lives, but the redemption of the human heart. There are moments in life when God doesn't speak through thunder or scripture, but through the quiet breath of a creature once broken. Boris, the bear who suffered in silence, became more than a rescued life. He became a reminder that compassion is the purest miracle we can offer each other. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, is a spark of divinity reflected on earth. Perhaps that is God's way of whispering to us, "You were made to protect, not to harm." In a world often blinded by greed, Michael, Emily, and Boris showed that faith is not just prayer, it's action. The chains we break for others are the same chains that free our own hearts. If this story touched your soul, take a moment to share it. because stories like this are how light travels. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us what kindness means to you. And if you believe that miracles still walk among us, sometimes on four paws, then don't forget to subscribe, so together we can keep these stories alive. May God bless every heart that listens, every hand that helps, and every soul that still believes that love, in all its forms, is the greatest miracle of all.